Right, thank you. We are back in the live session after our closed session. Is there any motions to be made as a result of our closed session? Oh, sorry, I thought it was on the screen. Sorry, Councilman. Councilman Goswing, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion if so the motion arising out of the closed session that by the end of February 2023, administration arranged for a closed session discussion on the joint high school site assembly project and that the representatives from the respective school boards be invited.
Thank you. Care to speak to your motion? It seems pretty straightforward. You're good to go?
I'm good.
Okay, discussion on the motion from council? Seeing none, I'll ask council to vote on the motion. Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor.
Thank you very much. That carries unanimously. Thank you, council. Next on our agenda on the growth plan is Bellevue Outdoor Rink improvements, phase 2. Any questions or concerns from council or observations on that particular growth item? Councillor Miller. Ashley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have a couple questions regarding phase 2. So in the budget, there's a line 474, and that's for phase 2. It does note in there, sorry, lost the page here, that does include a skate shack. Can you elaborate on, is that a typo? Is that a mistake? And then I have a following question, if that's okay.
Mic's on.
Through the mayor to Councillor Miller, yes, that there is a misalignment in the scope statement and the costs. The shelter portion of that was included as part of the 2024-2025 costs that you see under permanent skate shacks in the 5-year capital plan.
Mhm.
So that was a misalignment of the scope statement. So the skate shelter is not included as part of the 474,000 for 2023.
Okay, thank you for that. The 475, I'm going to hit on, so on page 123, the 25,000 under 2024 for the permanent skate shacks. There's 25,000 allocated in 2024, and then there's 450,000 in 2025. 25,000, I'm assuming, is for design. 450 is going to include the 3 shacks, not 2, because we're including Bellevue. What does 450,000 essentially give us is what I'm looking for before I provide a motion or however that looks.
Through the mayor to Councillor Miller, the 450 was a basic amount for us to provide a basic shelter that's heated with a dressing room. The idea behind that amount was that the structure would have to be built to commercial code with proper footings and foundation and cladding and meeting architectural requirements for the areas and so forth. So that amount is a basic amount for 3 shelters at Bellevue, at Monteley, as well as at J.E. LaPointe.
Okay, sorry, heated dressing room, washroom?
That does not include a washroom.
Does not include a washroom. Is there any reason why we would not include a washroom like the Bellevue one had?
Through the mayor to Councillor Miller, basically, we put in a basic amount to ensure that we're considering shelters at these locations. We will be doing engagement with user groups to see if that's something we want to put in there. There are operational impacts to that. We did have a lot of issues with washrooms in the current Bellevue, or the former Bellevue shelter. The washrooms were constantly vandalized and were a very difficult thing for us to upkeep. So at this point, we just put in a basic amount to ensure that we understand that that was something the council was interested in and the public was interested in. So we put that in there. Further, like I said, further engagement with user groups. If that's something we want to include, we can definitely adjust and look at the cost to do that.
Okay, thank you. Should I bring forward my motion?
You can. Is there another question, Sam, on this particular topic? Okay, maybe we'll go to Sam's question first, and we'll come back to you, Ashley. Councilor McCough-Swain.
Yeah, thanks. We were successful in getting a federal grant for I'll call it the first phase of this rink. This 474,000, I see it's a capital expense, but I don't know, is this MSI, is this federal, we're going to get a new grant? Like where are we looking to take that out of?
Mr. DeBlanco?
Yeah, thanks for the question. As proposed in the budget, it's just from a grant pool. So particular grant, once again, at the end, we'll reevaluate, look at which most appropriate funding source it would be. Once again, it'll be one of the grant pools.
So I guess my question is, we got a grant from the feds to do 75% of it. Like, are we going back to, or is that well being tapped? Like, are we done there? Are we going to have to use our own grant money for this now?
So I believe it was a Western diversification grant, if I'm not mistaken, accounted for 75 or 750,000. That's $750,000. I believe it was a matching grant for 75%. 250,000 would come from our grant pool, likely the Canada Community Building Fund. This is an additional ask on top of that.
Yeah, okay, but we can't go back to that same grant to help us out here with 474.
As far as I know, that our options would be to take from our existing grant pool.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Newkirk, same topic. So you're good? Okay. Councilor Miller, you wish to do a follow-up?
Sure. Sorry, I realize I kind of hijacked that right into skate shacks when we were talking about phase 2, but I'm ready to present my motion if no one has any other questions.
Sure, please.
So I'm going to move that $475,000 be added to the 2023 capital budget for the permanent skate shack project.
Thank you. Please speak to your motion.
Sure. So noting that I'm going to start with the fact that Beaumont, Alberta, Beaumont specifically is a winter city. I feel like we spent a lot of money and we did those outdoor rinks, those 3 new outdoor rinks sufficiently, and they're very enjoyable for our city. I would like to close the loop on that experience for our residents. I think it's important checking out other municipalities and being involved in sports and recreation to have those structures there. Not only does, one thing I think we have to keep in mind is that not only does it provide an opportunity for children to put their skates on, but not everybody that's frequenting those rinks is there to skate either. We've got parents, that would like a place to maybe to go or to be there to supervise their own kids, things like that. So I've thought of different interim kind of strategies, and Kendra provided me some information on ATCO trailers. Certain other thoughts have been flying around my mind, but it doesn't, I'm not content with that solution. I think that we have dollars in here that have been thought out for the future for these structures. The one structure at Bellevue, which has been there since I'm not even sure what year, that outdoor, that shack has greatly impacted residents growing up here and been a staple in their not only memories, but I feel like it adds to the community. And I feel like bringing this forth now when we don't have a ton of capital projects on the go is a good time to do it. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any questions, I'm open to that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions for Councillor Miller directly or from administration on the proposed motion? Councillor McCough-Swain, followed by Councillor McCook. Sam, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. Generally, I'm supportive of this. If we had it in the budget, we were going to do it. I'd rather do it now and take advantage of that. The question I had, 2-part for administration. obviously we're going through and doing the Bellevue. Are there efficiencies of kind of doing this shack now while that Bellevue, that second part is being completed there? And then the second part of this, obviously administration, based on the budget, hadn't planned to do this type of capital project. I assume there is enough staffing capability to be able to manage that.
Mr. Lewicki.
Through the mayor to Councillor Monkoff Swain. For your first question, the efficiencies. Definitely, there is an advantage to doing the skate shelter or shack during the 2023 phase 2 work, just from disturbance of landscaping and other items that are happening there. There's definitely an advantage there with that aspect. And sorry, I forget your second question.
Just to make sure that there was, administration hadn't planned to be able to deliver this. So just assuming that you guys can deliver this in 2023.
Yes. So basically, we would manage this as part of that phase 2 project, and we would just add that scope to that project, and not sure how we would procure the other 2 if we would add it into this or whatever, but I think that it's doable.
Yeah, so I see a whole bunch of efficiencies, and I think it's a great idea, and thank Councilor Miller for bringing it forward. So I'll support the motion when it's time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cook, followed by Councillor Van Duzer, followed by Councillor Tessier, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. You spoke about discussing with some user groups and stuff like that. Will that occur prior to any building happening, or to discuss washrooms and whatnot?
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook. Yes, we would be communicating with user groups on needs and wants and so on. And I think what we do then is at that point is reevaluate what those needs are and what that looks like from a shelter design perspective. And then if we feel that, as I indicated previously, that funding does not include washrooms in it, if we need to put washrooms in, we can bring that back in 2023 and say, here's what we heard. Here's what we need in addition to that to facilitate user needs.
Okay.
And we would do that before we build, or at least as part of the build process.
Okay, thank you.
Kat, if you don't mind,
Yep.
Mr. Suter wants to speak
Yep.
on the same question. If you don't mind, Mr. Suter.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, absolutely. Where those 3 rinks, the new boarded rinks, are located, we've got schools, we've got Beaumont Shinny that runs out of Bellevue, we've got Baja and that rink behind. So we would definitely engage them all just to make sure that we're delivering a product that they want and would use. We've never established this as a service level. Bellevue rink is it was a historical building. The others have never had anything. So, from a MIN's perspective, we've never established that service level as to what we wanted on site. And of course, as Mr. Loki indicated, there's maintenance and operational impacts to all these decisions, of course. So we would, balance everybody wants everything. I get that, but we have to balance what's a real need as opposed to just a nice to have, because the bigger they are, obviously, the more expensive they are. So thank you.
For sure. Thank you for that clarity. I'm probably reaching here a little bit, but if there were washrooms to be built in them, could they be used year round? There's parks close to there, or is that something we would shut down?
Through the mayor to Councillor McCook, it is a possibility. I think, for instance, the washrooms at the spray park shut down for the winter because they don't, as Mr. Suter had mentioned, they're having washrooms that are in a facility that aren't supervised or what have you. We definitely see a lot of vandalism. I mean, the toilets get smashed somehow, the sinks get broken. Like, it's amazing to see what kind of damage happens. And and then the water flows all over and then things freeze and things like, so there are issues, but it is possible that there's no restriction there. They would be heated. If a washroom facility was put in there is a potential that it could be open all year round.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Miller, just so you're clear that the washrooms are not part of this ask per se.
Yeah, I'm clear that at this point, they're not in this ask and I, I'm gonna leave it up to you guys, the experts to kind of go through the specifics of what needs to be in there. I do know, that being said, that there are porta potties in that field when it comes to Monteley or Dansero. So for the washroom aspect, I'm not thinking for skating, but I'm thinking if we're talking year round, for example, that is already kind of taken care of. But I feel like we'll cross that. We'll talk about the washrooms after. I'm not with this cost. It's disappointing the washrooms aren't in there. I would like to see them, but it's not make or break it for me.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Through the
Thanks,
mayor
Pat.
to Councillor Miller. I
Yes.
also just want to add, as indicated previously, we would definitely do that.
Yeah.
That review with the user groups and also with Mr. Suter's team and so on. And if we feel that that is something that we definitely want to put in
Right.
there, we will bring that back to council as an option for approval of further funding as required.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kat, you're good. Thank you. Councilman Newkirk, followed by Councilor Tesse, followed by Councilor Barnhart. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question on timing for this. I know it was presented as 25,000 for, presumably design and study, and then 450 in the next year for construction. What's proposed here is lumping that all together in the 2023 budget, which would mean, design and then construction, in this season, or however long it takes to go through that process. So at Bellevue, it's very clear where the shack would go, right? The other two sites, it isn't as clear at all. And the siting of those sites, I wonder what kind of challenges are going to come up to site a shack at both of those sites. For instance, the Ken Nichols site, currently the access and the benches and stuff are on the west side, close to a parking lot next to a hill. I don't know where you're going to put a skate shack on the west side of that thing. Right. So you put a skate shack on the east side of it, and then we're into some landscaping and groundworks and rubber flooring, whatever, or maybe we can put another gate in the side, right? So what I'm getting at, and then Dansero, if you look at the number of feet, I drove by these both today and had a look. If you look at, from the path to the boards and from the path to the benches, you're going to be tough to shoehorn a building of adequate size into that spot and not have it look silly. So with that said, it's all well and good to do the 475 and whatnot, but what I don't want to lose sight of is that if something is challenging or might not work or might not make sense, like I wouldn't want to just move ahead with the project, right? Like Bellevue is clear. We know that, right? Like, and the disturbance and all that stuff can happen. But if upon the design review and those types of things, it might not make sense to cite them, or there's citing challenges or those types of things, I would want council to hear about that. So, I'm not at all saying no to this ask, but what I'm saying is that through this process, because we're lumping the process together, if we would have done it as presented, the 25,000 would have came back with design. We'd have saw pictures, you would have done a report, you would have told us about the challenges. I want to make sure we don't lose that part of the process. Just looking to legislative services to, do we need a motion here to make sure that, council gets a report back on design before they proceed, or what is the better way to go? I don't know, Mr. Suter or Ledge, I'm not sure. Mr. Loki.
Through the mayor to Councillor Van Newkirk. As part of the process with design, obviously, if there wouldn't be a suitable location or something that doesn't make sense or doesn't work, we would bring that back flag that as an issue and say, look, we're struggling with that. And that is typically, we try to make sure that we have, if we stage it that way, as you indicated, it helps us to avoid those sorts of issues. My fear here would be that if we start bringing back to council, we may delay the ability to finish the project on time. So if there are issues with finding a location, which when we have our consultant do the work to design this, it should be evident that there's a problem or not a problem. And we could bring that back if there are any issues with the design process.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is I wouldn't want to be in a spot where, you know, council told us to build a rink shack, so we built a rink shack.
Yeah.
Here you go. Right? Like it's got to make sense for the community, the space, the design, all that stuff. So I don't know, maybe I've got my point across, I guess. I don't know.
Through the mayor to Councillor Van Newkirk, we also hire professional firms to do the siting and the stuff, like the grades are, everything's considered, like your surface runoff, your access issues, all of those things will be considered. It won't just be shimmied into a spot and go, oh, well, this door opens into a wall, right? Like we'll make sure that it is functional and usable as intended and so on. So if there would be a red flag that somehow we couldn't fit the building into the area required, or there's a no-go, we would bring that back and say, look, we need to reconsider this. It's going to take more time and go from there.
Yeah.
On that point, Steve, Mr. Suter, just to add additional comments. Hang on. Your mic's on now.
Yeah, thank you. Not to belabor the point, but those are all recent builds. So we have a lot of that data already from the design for those sites. So drainage and all that stuff, it's already been looked at. So I think it should be a fairly quick process to determine the proper location if there is a good location. And the engagement with our stakeholders should be very brief because it's very targeted. So I don't think that's going to hold anything up very much. So that helps.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Tessier, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Renee, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Miller, for bringing this forward. Obviously, I have a lot of memories at that old Bellevue rink too. So, yeah, I'm in favor of the motion. I like it because when I'm bringing my young kids to the rink, you end up going into where the benches are, and the kids are flying in and out, and there's boots everywhere, and it's you know, I rather do this earlier than later instead of pushing it and pushing it. And also, we're gonna have to replace the rink again with no skate shack. So, couple of questions for admin, I guess. Are we thinking about talking? I know the last talks didn't go all that well with the rink, but are we looking at maybe chatting with Baja to see if we can build these skate shacks to a larger level so that they can use it for practice? Not that I want to confuse the motion, it's just a question.
Thanks for the question. Great question. They have a vested interest in what we may want to do there. They have indicated in the past they would love to do something like that, but you know, if it would work, I don't know offhand. We've never looked at it seriously as far as like anything larger there, Councillor Tessier, but I know Baja is very interested in doing something like that. This winter we'll see how much they actually use it for practice. They have some nights earmarked for that, so we'll see how much use they get. That might help that conversation as well as far as what the need might be. So
Yeah, I've been out there a couple times, and even for my oldest boy, he's just U7, but without dressing rooms, it makes it difficult to use it. So I almost can guarantee that if there's some extra funds requested or given by them, if there's dressing rooms, it'll for sure get used. Is one thing. Second to that is I see the Zamboni storage, not to skip next, it'll tie in, is also being built at the J.E. LaPointe rink. So is this going to be looked at like an all-in-one type of building, which would make sense because the services are going to be all at one spot. So we're looking at a skate shack, potentially the bigger dressing rooms and the Zamboni storage that will only be used for this rink, or is that Zamboni able to drive down to the other two rinks?
Through the mayor to Councillor Tessier. Yes, I think that's a good point. I think that if this project is moved forward with the skate shacks, we would look at those two projects together and see how we can integrate. I don't know what that looks like right now. Maybe it's one building, maybe it's separate, maybe there are different places. So yes, I think that would be evaluated and considered. Your second question, yes, that shelter or that Zamboni shelter at J.E. LaPointe would also service the Bellevue rink.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. It's quality ice that way for sure. And you know, there could potentially be cost savings with that as well if the design is all in one. So thanks so much for the answers and yeah, support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Miller, for bringing this forward. I think it's a great idea that we have everything we can possibly have to make winter more enjoyable, and I think this goes a long way for families and children in our community. So I'm in favor of the direction. The question I'm not clear on is the source of funding. I heard conversation about the grants, but I think I might have missed something. Maybe that's a question for Mr. Dowler or Mr. DeBlanco.
Thanks for the question. Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart, the funding source for this would likely be grants, but once again, we'll come back, we'll evaluate the capital budget overall and look at what the most appropriate funding source would be.
If it did come back as pay as you go, I would have trouble approving it. So at this point, I guess I'm conditionally approving it. But I'm hoping that it can come out of grants, so just so I'll make council aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tessier, you have a follow-up? Go ahead, Renee.
Just a question on process. So I understand what you're saying, Councillor Barnhart. So at the end of this, are we going to be told, you know, $3 million is covered by grants, but there's $400,000 that's going to require us to go pay as you go, and 200,000 of it's going to affect the tax levy. And then we're going to have to go back into it and be like, okay, actually, let's pull this. And then we're back in the war zone.
Mr. Dowler, I see your button's on. Your mic's on now, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the short answer to that question, Councillor Tessier, is we could. The reality is, though, I think in terms of the impact on the tax levy, we've already built in an amount for pay-as-you-go into the tax levy, so there wouldn't be any further implication on the tax levy. The only implication at this point would be as if we required a project that's been moved forward to be funded by debt. Then you're going to see an impact directly on that decision on the tax levy. Outside of that, the money that we have in the capital budget, we could be shifting things around so that it doesn't necessarily get fully funded by grant, but the ultimate outcome of that would be no increase to a tax levy.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I like to support the motion myself. My only concern is from an operating perspective. So I know at present we don't have washrooms now. So buildings with a washroom requires the water to be brought in and requires more maintenance as opposed to a shack with just power and electricity or heat to keep it warm for parents. So I guess when the report comes back, I'm hoping the report will tell us if we do put washrooms in, the additional cost and the impact on operation. We make an informed decision at that time regarding the additions of washrooms. The biggest thing is operating. Sometimes it's surprising how much operating costs when you don't think about it. Anyway, I know we can't talk about it tonight, and that's fine. So having no further hands up for discussion on the motion, I'll at this time ask council to vote on the motion, please. Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor, Mayor.
Thank you. And council carries unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Miller, for bringing this motion forward. Thank you, council, for the good questions, administration, and good answers back to us as well, too. Appreciate that. Next on the line coming down is facilities, design, and engagement. Are there any questions or thoughts from council on that line of the growth capital budget? Seeing none, next on the line is fleet and equipment growth. I believe Councillor Barnhart has I'm sorry, Councillor McCook, did you have a question above that on this particular item? On this one? Okay. Actually, it's okay to go to Councillor Barnhart first and then come back to you, Kat. Thank you. So on fleet and equipment growth, Councillor Barnhart, I believe you have some questions and observations, so please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The plan that I had was to put forward a motion here, but I'll just speak to it quickly. What I do see is that there are some items in the pay-as-you-go. One of the questions that I asked at the administration was if there were any lower priorities, what would they be? And what came back to me, to us, were 3 items: Zamboni, Christmas decorations, and office furnishings. Well, I understand those are obviously needs that the city has. Perhaps this would be an area where we could defer some of those wants or needs until a further year or till further grants were available. As Mr. Daller has said, we can move things around depending on what is available. So I would like to put forward a motion, and I believe Ms. Jaga has put it up there. And if it's okay, Mayor, I'll just read that.
Yep, can you see it from where you?
Yes, I can. The technology is working beautifully. That the 2023 fleet and equipment replacement program be reduced by $215,000 by delaying the lowest priority items for consideration at a future budget cycle. And just to speak a little further to it, the $215,000 is basically the sum of the three items that the administration did bring back. And I understand those are estimates, and perhaps that number isn't going to be exact, but that's roughly what I was going for. And maybe Mr. Dowler can speak to the amount. I don't know if that is close, but I think it's approximately 1% increase in tax levy. It's a question there, Mr. Dowler. Is that number close?
Mr. Dowler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You are correct, Councillor Barnhart. In terms of the number itself, 215,000 would be roughly or very close to a equivalent 1% tax increase if it was to come from property tax.
And I believe that is where pay-as-you-go funding does come from. Is that also correct?
It is fundamentally. And so what I would just caution council at this point is if the motion were to pass and we were to remove $215,000 from pay-as-you-go, you do receive a one-time benefit of reduction on the tax levy. But you have then impaired your ability to fund any future capital to the tune of $215,000 on an annual basis. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Could you explain that maybe just one more time?
Yeah.
I think
Mr. Dowler, I don't think I get that, because I think council could put the money back into the pay-as-you-go, could it not?
If council did choose to remove the $215,000 in this budget, you will see the benefit of a roughly, again, approximately 1% reduction on the tax rate. If council were to choose to include it in the 2024 budget as an increase to pay-as-you-go, you then are increasing taxes by an equivalent 1%.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you get
We're delaying it. Essentially, we're pushing it to another year when there may not be, there always are, but there may not be the same priorities in that year. So
you get a
I
one-time
understand.
reduction in 23. And again, if nothing else was put forward in the 24 budget, you've removed $215,000 out of your capital funding envelope. And again, impairs your ability to fund capital projects on a go-forward basis.
Okay, Mr. Dowler, I think that's confusing me because council can decide what those amounts are in the capital budget, correct?
Sorry, Counselor. I think CEO Short switches to jump in on this conversation before I go to Mr. Dowler. So Mike, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor and Councillor Barnhart and the rest of the council. I just want to clarify the motion because I think we're answering a question that we're not entirely understanding. Here's what I mean. Are you requesting that we reduce the annual contribution to the pay-as-you-go by $215,000? Or are you suggesting that we reduce the fleet equipment program expenditures by $215,000? I think it's the former, that you want to reduce the contribution to pay-as-you-go by 215.
Yes, my intent is to bring down our tax levy increase.
Okay.
And
So what
it's
Mr.
not that I
Dowler-
don't think these are valuable. Yeah.
So what Mr. Dowler is saying is by doing that, then you're no longer contributing $870,000 to the pay-as-you-go. You're contributing less by $215,000. So in 2023, yes, that would reduce the tax rate by 1%-ish, a little less than that. However, going forward, if you were to add that to the reserve in 2024, then you're immediately increasing the tax rate by 1%. Now, I don't know if I just confused you even further, but.
Well, I mean, I think it's moving things around. It's still tax levy, no matter how you look at it. It's taxpayers' money. And we're moving it from one year to the next. I think council makes the decision as to how much to put into those reserves, does it not?
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
And
I'm just
so-
trying to clarify that we're answering the question that you're asking. That's all I'm trying to clarify. So effectively, if you wanted to, and you don't need to in 2024, you don't need to add that 215, but if you did right off the bat to maintain services, you're up to that 1%. And then what Mr. Dowler was saying is if you don't add that 215, then it reduces council's ability to spend from that reserve by 215,000 every year. So in 5 years, that reserve would be less $1.1 million. Okay, that's all. I just wanted to make sure we're on this same page. Thank you.
Okay, I think you have muddied the waters a bit for me here, because what I'm essentially trying to do is to, in a year when I feel that the tax increase is going to be a burden on some of our residents, I'm trying to get it down. I understand that, with inflation and things that are going on, maybe it's just going to keep on going up every year, but I'd like to hope not. I'd like to find some more efficiencies, and we have some big asks in this budget, as we've already talked about. So I'm just looking at ways that we can defer. If I'm looking at this from a perspective of an individual, if you don't have the money today, it doesn't mean you're never going to get it. It means that you can save your money and get it later. So I'm trying to defer some of these asks so that we can do the things that our citizens and our councillors want to see happen. And I think these are three important pieces, but I don't think that they are essential. So that's my intent, and I'll give it that shot and answer any questions others may have.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Cook, do you wish to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Councillor Barnhart. Can you just clarify again which pieces you want removed?
So let's see, in the book, sorry.
Page 89.
I want to make sure you can hear me. In the book on page 89.
Yep.
When I had asked the question, and I don't have all my questions in front of me, so I can't really refer to which question exactly it was. I can read it, but I don't know what number it is. I asked, what are the three lowest priorities on the list? And the administration came back with fleet equipment Zamboni for $125,000, holiday decorations for $40,000, and office furnishings renewal for $50,000. So that is what the administration came back with as their lowest priorities. And again, I'm not putting those specific words into the motion. What I'm suggesting is that we delay the lowest priority items as per the administration's response.
If I may, Mr. Blanco, which is speak on that point, if I could. Mr. Blanco.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. I think there's some confusion on which program we're addressing. So the motion on the screen identifies the fleet and equipment replacement program. That's funded by the fleet and equipment reserve. So not pay as you go. There is a fleet and equipment growth program. Those are new pieces, not replacement of equipment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is funded from pay as you go for the most part. And those items are listed on page 122 and 123. So those specific items as addressed, the Zamboni, Christmas decorations, that's replacing existing assets funded from reserves.
Okay, so
So the administration, if I may, Mayor, that's what they came back with in the answer to my question.
okay, actually, Councillor Barnard, I may have made a mistake. It may have been me that got this down the wrong rabbit hole, because I was on growth and I thought fleet and equipment growth was what Councillor Barnard was suggesting, and she's referring to fleet and equipment replacement program, which is part of renewal. Is that correct?
The motion on the screen is referencing renewal, and if, once again, I'd have to look in the questions. The question
Okay.
was asking about the renewal program.
Right, so, Mr. Lewicki, hang on, Councilor Barnhart.
Sorry, I hate to be so confused, but I am.
Through the mayor to Councillor Barnhart. I remember the question. The question was about the fleet and equipment renewal program. I think the confusion is that we were talking about growth and now we've moved back to renewal. So I think that's where the confusion lies. The elements in question would be the Zamboni, the holiday decorations and the office furnishings, which were part of the renewal fleet and equipment program. So we would be talking, the question would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Barnhart, but the question itself is referencing the fleet and equipment renewal program, not growth. That's how I understood it. So just to clear, just so. I
Well,
think,
no, my concern was not to reduce the reserve. It was to reduce the pay as you go.
So Councillor Barnhart, I do believe that the Zamboni, the decorations and office furnishings renewal, 215,000 are part of the fleet and equipment replacement program under the renewal section of the growth of the capital budget on the top of page 88, which is funded fully by reserves. So not paying for those three things will not affect any positive change on the tax increase. Am I correct, Mr. DeBlanco?
Yes, that's correct. I'm just rereading the question here and to be fair, they are very similar titled programs, fleet and equipment replacement, fleet and equipment growth. One is funded from the reserve.
Yeah.
The replacement program, the growth program is funded from pay as you go.
So Councillor Barnhart, I apologize if I went to fleet and growth and went to you first thinking that was where you wanted to talk about. That may have been my mistake. So having said that, your intention to reduce the tax levy will not be affected by this motion. So do you wish to continue with the motion?
I need to withdraw it. I need to withdraw it because I don't think I got the answer to my question clear. So
Can I clarify? It might be helpful, Councillor Barnhart. I don't think we have the fleet and equipment growth page.
maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, so we don't know what the
Where is that 552,000? That's a good question. Thank you very much, Councillor McCook. I must have jumped into assuming that page was it.
Mr. Blanco.
Yes, and sorry about that. That was an oversight, but for the specific items within the growth program, you could look at page 122 and 123, and you would see the projects that exist within that program.
So 122 and 123 of your budget. So Mr. Blanco, if you wouldn't mind briefly, so we are on fleet and equipment growth totaling 552,500. Can you just reference on page 122 and 123, which line items that entails?
Yes, sure. So at the bottom
That'll
of
help clarify,
page
please.
122 and 123, there is a sum total at the top, which in the first column for 2023, it's 552,500.
Right.
There is 125,000 for a radio communication system. And if we flip to the next page, there's a number in that same 2023 column. There are a number of fleet and equipment units listed, starting at the top down to when we get to the high school site.
And the last thing it says is portable heavy vehicle scales at 30,000. That's the end of the category, correct?
That's correct.
So 122 to 123, that clarifies it. So Councillor Barnhart, just to clarify, do you wish to withdraw your motion then, just so we're clear?
I'm going to go back to the drawing board because again, the question came back with those answers for pay as you go. So I don't know. Obviously, between myself and the administration,
Do you have
I
your?
was mixed up. Help me.
Okay, you know what we're going to do?
So I will go back to the drawing board, Mayor. I apologize.
So Councillor Barnhart withdraws her motion. We'll continue on with this category. And just after supper break, we'll take a moment and try and figure out the answer and come back to Councillor Barnhart to make sure she gets her concern answered as best we can. Are you okay with that, Councillor Barnhart?
I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I believe Councillor Cook, you had a question. Was it on a different topic in the same category?
Design, yeah.
Which is, make sure we're clear on my mind, fleet and equipment growth, or sort of
Mine was just the one above.
facilities design and engagement. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go back to that one then.
Is that okay?
Yeah, let's go back to that one. So we are now going to go back one line up Kat has a question on facilities design and engagement. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the work that is moving forward on the presentation we received. And I just want to ensure that it will give us the clarity we need to move forward on the strategies that were presented. So there were, and we see it here in the supplemental information with our 5-year growth plan and whatnot. Things coming along the lines like BMX pump track and stuff. There's some items that some councillors have moved forward already, and some that I'd also like to see happen a bit sooner if possible. However, I know they're very contingent on this plan and understanding where our city is going moving forward and how we're going to move some of these pieces around. So my question is around, will we have that clarity after this 200,000, and approximately when will this come back to us? Do we know? Not sure who wants to take that ball. CEO Schwartz.
I see no hands up. Just give me a second here. Mr. Dowler, the potato's in your hands right now.
And I'll apologize, Councilman McCook. I didn't quite hear your question. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of paraphrasing what you're looking for, I can hopefully provide a response.
That's okay. Just the ask here for the facilities design and engagement. I'm just wondering, after this is completed, will we then have a really clear picture as to what the plan will be moving forward? So some of the stuff that we see on the 5-year capital plan, will we know exactly when this will fall and where this will go? And then if we want to move some of those things up a little sooner, like, I said some pickleball courts and stuff like that are probably very contingent on where we decide to put things. So will we have that clarity after this piece? And when do we think this will come back to us?
Thank you for reiterating your question, and I apologize again.
No, that's okay.
So the hope would be is with that $200,000, yes, council would be able to have a better picture and understanding of a couple of things. One, the timing, definitely, and the sequencing of when things would potentially happen. I would also hope to have a better idea as to financing associated with getting some of those pieces moved forward. There would be a public engagement component to it. So we would have hopefully some preliminary design that would be circulated amongst user groups as well as the public. Certainly as it relates to user groups too, again, the sequencing of things would be primary consideration when discussing those with those groups. But yeah, so the big pieces would be the financing. How do we actually see this happening? The timing on when elements would need to happen. So kind of that domino effect, like what would have to first happen before we could go on to some other steps. And getting some design feedback from the public, all within that $200,000. And in terms of when we would be coming back, I would hope on a project such as this, there would be regular touch points with council is kind of the way I would be approaching it. So on a monthly or at least quarterly basis, talking to council about where we're at with the project. Ultimately, I would think we'd probably be looking at late summer, early fall before we would come back with probably a complete picture of those aspects.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that, because I know after that presentation, council was very excited to see, and it was exciting to see a plan move forward. So I just want to make sure that with this ask that it's enough and that we have what we need to be able to really put those things in motion. And kind of, we always talk about forecasting for the future and not reacting in the moment. So I just want to make sure that that's sufficient enough, and we'll be able to move forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate that. That was a question on, sorry, the hand up. Sorry, I apologize. That was a question on facilities design and engagement. Any further questions on that? And they'll drop back down to fleet and equipment growth. So we're good with facilities design and engagement? Okay, we'll go back down to fleet and equipment growth. Councillor Barnhart, we have found that question KB 22, and across the bottom of the line, I do believe it says the fleet and equipment replacement program, which is part of renewal at the top of page 88 under capital, is funded by the replacement reserve. So I think you may have assumed it was pay as
Mayor, if I may, I did look it up myself, and I appreciate that, it's confusing. The answer came back from the administration. And this is a lot of work that everybody's trying to do, and I appreciate that. But it did mix the two things up. And I think it sent me down a rabbit hole that I didn't want to go down. But I did suggest that there was a list, and what they came back with was the Zamboni, the decorations, and the office furnishings. And I don't know what list anymore. I've got myself totally backwards here. So, I'm really, I'm not any further ahead yet. And so I need a little more time.
Okay, no problem. I'm looking just at page 37 of the questions back from administration, and your
KB 22.
And the very last line, it says fleet and equipment growth projects are funded by pay as you go. Sorry. Yeah, and the Zamboni decoration and renewal are part of the equipment replacement program under renewal, which is funded by reserves. So
I never mentioned those. Mayor, I never even brought up those three items. I don't know why the administration went there. That's the part that's confusing me.
Okay.
So I need time with it.
We'll come back after the break to give you a chance to kind of go through that. But right now your motion's been withdrawn, so we're okay with that. We'll come back to you.
Yeah, I'll work on it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So we're still now on fleet and equipment growth. Councillor Tessier was next, and then Councillor Monkoff Swain, then Councillor Van Newkirk. So Renee, you have the floor now for fleet and equipment growth under the growth section, please.
I got like a process question on pay as you go then, because
Okay.
we keep talking about tax levy and how it affects pay as you go. Can we clear that up exactly? Because I don't remember last year us talking about capital that's going to affect the tax levy by increasing or decreasing it by 1%. So we need to be like crystal clear here. Obviously on page 88, I see the numbers here listed as growth and pay as you go. If all those are approved, the tax levy stays in the municipal operating side, correct?
Mr. Dowler.
Councillor Tessier, yes, exactly that. So if all of those items approved or identified with funding as pay-as-you-go get approved, the tax increase is 7.4. The flip side, and Mr. DeBlanco will correct me if I'm wrong, if council chose to unfund all of those, your tax increase is 7.4. If council chose to pursue a motion that was on the screen earlier, that pay-as-you-go be reduced, your tax increase will then shift and be lower than 7.4.
So you're telling me these capital projects affect the tax levy of 7.4%?
I would say that funding those projects from pay-as-you-go do not impact the 7.4%. Okay, so they're built into the base budget. What impacts the tax rate is any incremental change from that base. So
From the $807,500. So if we go
That's
up
right.
from there, the potential could be an increase to the tax levy.
That's right.
Unless it's pulled from reserves or grants. And we won't know that until the end.
Right, but as administration, we would not fund any of the items that council is bringing forward from pay-as-you-go. We would not increase that 807 to fund those items. So we would not impact the tax levy to fund the additional items that are being brought forward.
Okay, that is much clearer. I understand now. Thank you. Because
You bet.
I'm wondering if Councillor Barnhart wants to pull 200,000 and affects the tax levy. But it actually won't technically, because we're gonna just fill that with the other things we just added.
So I'll try and be clear. If there is a motion from council to reduce pay-as-you-go, and if we think pay-as-you-go as a program, okay? If council were to put forward a motion to reduce pay-as-you-go by $200,000 in 2023, you would see a reduction in the tax increase. It would be like any other reduction to any other budget item on the operating budget. So hopefully that's clear. The only way that pay-as-you-go would increase in 2023, increase to the tax levy, would be as if council put forward a motion and wanted to increase pay-as-you-go funding from 807 to $900,000. So you then see an increase to your tax rate with the approval of a motion like that. Now, I've probably just confused things even more.
Nope,
I
you made
apologize,
it
but-
very clear. That perfect.
Okay,
Thank you, because it was going up and down here on how that's working. So I'm crystal clear. Thank you.
okay, you're welcome.